Welcome to Inside the Philippines. I'm your host, and today's story is going to stick with you. This is Roy. He's 54 years old, from Portland, Oregon. Spent 30 years as a baker before selling his business and finding himself alone with nowhere to be and nobody who needed him. He came to the Philippines looking for something he'd lost, not a wife necessarily, not at first, just a place where he could matter to someone again. He met a woman in Cebu, not in a bar, not on a dating app, in a bakery supply shop of all places. She seemed different. She had a job, a family, a life of her own. She didn't ask for anything. And when her family welcomed him in, treated him like he belonged, something in Roy's chest that had been locked tight for years finally loosened. What happened next changed everything. By the time Roy understood what was really going on, he was sitting in the back of a taxi heading to the airport, listening to a conversation in Tagalog that the driver didn't know he could understand. A conversation about when to finish him completely. Here's his story. In his own words, "I never thought I'd be one of those guys. You know the type. The lonely American chasing some fantasy halfway around the world, convincing himself it's different this time. She's different, he's different. I'd see them in the bakery sometimes during my last few years, older guys stopping in before their flights to Manila or Cebu, talking too loud about their girlfriends back in the Philippines, showing pictures on their phones to anyone who'd look. I'd nod politely and think, well, shoot, that's not me. That'll never be me. But loneliness does things to your decision-making. Changes the math on what sounds reasonable. I ran a small artisan bakery in Portland's Alberta Arts District for 30 years. Roy's bread. Nothing fancy, just good sourdough and baguettes and the kind of whole-grain loaves that hippies and foodies would line up for. I was up at 3 a.m. every single morning. 7 days a week at first, then 6, when I finally hired help. But I was still there before dawn, mixing dough, feeding my starters, getting the ovens going. I knew my regulars by name. Mrs. Chen wanted her sourdough extra crusty. Tom needed his baguettes by 6005 sharp or he'd miss his train. The smell of rising dough in the dark was the most consistent thing in my life for 3 decades. The divorce happened 5 years ago. My ex-wife wasn't wrong about everything she said. I did miss Emma's dance recitals because I couldn't leave during the morning rush. I did forget our anniversary 1 year because I was experimenting with a new rye starter and lost track of time. I chose the bakery over a lot of things, over a lot of people, but I didn't think I was choosing it over my family. I thought I was building something for my family. Turns out there's a difference between providing for people and actually being there for them, and I learned it too late. Emma and Sophie, my daughters, 26 and 23, now stopped calling after the divorce. Their mother had a version of events where I was the absent workaholic who cared more about bread than his own kids. And you know what? She wasn't entirely wrong. I'd see their Instagram posts sometimes. Emma got engaged last year. Sophie got a promotion at her marketing firm in Seattle. I wasn't invited to any of it. I'd scroll past their lives from my phone, from my studio apartment in southeast Portland, and feel this hollow ache that I couldn't do anything about. I sold the bakery 18 months ago, got $95,000 after paying off the business loan and covering lawyer fees from the divorce. I moved into a studio apartment, set up my pension from the Bakers Union, and for the first time in 30 years I didn't have to wake up at 3 a.m. I'd lie there in bed at 4, 5, 6 in the morning, wide awake from decades of habit, with absolutely nothing I needed to do. No dough rising, no customers depending on me, no reason to get up at all. The loneliness was suffocating. I'd go to the grocery store just to have someone to talk to at checkout. I'd take walks around the neighborhood and make up errands so I wouldn't spend the entire day alone in that studio. My daughters didn't call. I didn't have a business anymore. I didn't have a wife. I didn't have anything that made me feel like I mattered to anyone. That's the thing nobody tells you about retirement or selling your business or whatever you want to call it. Everyone congratulates you. They say you earned it, say you should enjoy it, say you're so lucky to have all this free time. But if you spent 30 years building your entire identity around getting up at 3 a.m. and making bread, what the hell are you supposed to do with yourself when that's gone? Who are you when nobody needs you anymore? I wasn't looking to move to the Philippines at first, wasn't looking to do much of anything really. Just sort of existing, waiting for something to feel important again. Dennis came into the bakery about 2 months before I sold it. He'd been a regular for years, always got a baguette and a cranberry walnut loaf on Saturdays, but I hadn't seen him in a while. Turned out he'd retired to Dumaguete in the Philippines about 2 years earlier. He was back in Portland visiting his daughter and her kids, and he stopped by to say hello. He looked different, tanned, relaxed in a way I'd never seen him before. He showed me photos on his phone beaches, his little house with a view of the ocean, his Filipina girlfriend Maria smiling next to him at some restaurant. He wasn't bragging about it, wasn't sleazy or creepy about the whole thing, just matter of fact. "Best decision I ever made, Roy," he said. "The women there actually care about you. They're not jaded like American women. They appreciate what you bring to the table. And your money goes 3 times as far. I'm living better on my pension there than I ever did here working full-time." I'll be honest, I'd always dismissed those passport bro types. The guys who go to Southeast Asia looking for a woman half their age who'll cook and clean and never talk back. It always seemed desperate and pathetic to me. But Dennis wasn't like that. He was 62, his girlfriend was 51. They met through friends at church. He seemed genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen in any of my divorced friends back in Portland. No bitterness, no anger, just contentment. "It's not like Thailand," he said, reading my hesitation. "More English speakers, Catholic values, family-oriented culture. It's not those ping-pong show countries, man. These are good people. Real people." After he left, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started watching YouTube videos late at night in my studio. Expat channels showing life in the Philippines, cost of living breakdowns, retirement guides, how far your dollar goes, Cebu versus Manila versus Dumaguete, SRRV visa requirements, all of it. I told myself I wasn't looking for a wife. I wasn't one of those desperate guys. I just wanted somewhere warm where my 95,000 might last longer. Somewhere I wouldn't spend every evening alone scrolling past my daughter's Instagram posts. Somewhere different. The Philippines seemed safe enough. English-speaking, not too foreign. Catholic, which meant it had some cultural overlap with what I knew growing up, even if I hadn't been to church in decades. I booked a ticket to Cebu for 10 days. Just a test run. See if I could even handle it. The flight was 13 hours from Portland to Taipei, then another few hours to Cebu. I landed at Mactan Airport at 11 p.m., exhausted and sweating through my shirt before I even made it through immigration. The heat hit me like a wall the second I stepped outside. Dense, humid, thick air that felt like breathing through a wet towel. Back in Portland, it was 55 degrees and drizzling. Here it was 85 at midnight. I took a taxi to my hotel in Cebu City. Even at that hour, the streets were chaos. Jeepneys painted in bright colors, motorcycles weaving through traffic, street vendors still selling food from carts. Everything was louder and more chaotic than I'd expected. The driver kept trying to chat with me. "First time in Philippines, sir." "Where you from, sir?" "You need tour guide, sir?" And I just wanted him to stop talking so I could process what I'd gotten myself into. The hotel was fine. Mid-range place near IT Park that I'd found on Booking.com. Clean enough, air conditioning that worked. But I barely slept. The jet lag, the unfamiliar sounds outside, the reality of what I was doing all kept me awake. At 4 a.m. I was wide awake from 30 years of habit. lying in a hotel bed halfway around the world, wondering what the hell I was thinking. The first few days were rough. I walked around Cebu City feeling completely out of place. Every vendor on the street. Hi sir, you need taxi sir, you want tour sir, massage sir, made me uncomfortable. I visited a few malls, Ayala Center, SM City Cebu. Ate at Jollibee because that's what all the YouTube videos said to do. The malls were nice, actually gleaming and modern with good air conditioning, but I felt like a tourist, like I was just going through the motions of what expats were supposed to do. I almost left early, almost changed my flight, and went home after 5 days. This was a mistake. I didn't belong here. I was just another lonely American guy who thought he could buy happiness in Southeast Asia. But on day 7, I was walking through a commercial district near the port area, and I passed a bakery supply shop. The window had industrial mixers and proofing cabinets on display. I stopped instinctively. Old habits. For 30 years, if I saw anything related to baking, I'd check it out. Compare equipment. See what they were selling. How much it cost. I walked in. The place smelled like flour and cardboard and new equipment. There were shelves of baking supplies, commercial-grade pans, sacks of different flours, industrial yeast. A young guy was helping someone in the back, and near the counter, a woman was looking through a catalog, taking notes. She looked up when I walked in. "Can I help you find something?" She was Filipina, maybe late 30s, wearing a simple blue blouse and jeans. No makeup, hair pulled back in a ponytail. She had a bookkeeper's energy, organized, practical, no nonsense. "Just looking," I said. "I used to run a bakery back in the States. Can't help myself when I see equipment." Her face lit up. "Really? What kind of bakery?" And just like that, we started talking. Her name was Crystal. She was helping her uncle source some equipment and ingredients for his small pan diesel operation. Did I know anything about commercial deck ovens versus convection? What about different flour types for artisan bread? Her uncle wanted to upgrade but didn't know where to start. I spent an hour in that shop talking to her about baking, hydration ratios for sourdough, the difference between Polish and Biga performance, how to maintain a starter in tropical heat. She wasn't flirting, she wasn't performing. She was genuinely interested in the technical details. She asked smart questions, took notes, wanted to know about margins and wholesale versus retail, customer acquisition, all the business side of running a bakery. It felt normal. It felt real. For the first time since I'd arrived in the Philippines, hell. For the first time in months, I was having a conversation that mattered, where someone actually wanted to hear what I had to say because I knew something useful. When I finally left, she thanked me, told me her uncle would really appreciate the advice, asked if I was in Cebu for long. "Few more days," I said. "Well, if you want to see a real local bakery operation, you should come by my uncle's place. It's small, nothing fancy like what you had, but you might find it interesting. And my mom makes the best kinalaw you'll ever taste." She wrote down her number on a piece of paper from the shop. "Just message me if you want, no pressure." I walked out of that shop feeling lighter than I had in months. I just had a normal human interaction with someone who didn't see me as a walking ATM or a target for a tour package. Someone who cared about the thing I'd spent my whole life doing. Someone who asked me questions because I actually had answers worth hearing. Maybe the Philippines wasn't a complete mistake after all. I messaged Crystal 2 days later, asked if the invitation was still open. She responded within an hour, "Yes, absolutely. How about Sunday?" Her family did lunch after church every week. Very casual. Just come hungry. I almost backed out 3 times that morning. Meeting the family felt serious. Felt like crossing a line from casual conversation into something else. But I'd already said yes, and besides, what else was I going to do? Sit in my hotel room watching YouTube videos about expat life instead of actually living it? She picked me up in front of my hotel in a beat-up Toyota that looked like it had survived several typhoons. We drove south from Cebu City into Talise, which she explained was a municipality just outside the main city. The traffic thinned out as we left downtown. More residential streets, modest houses packed close together, kids playing basketball in the street, sari-sari stores on every corner, selling cigarettes and snacks and cell phone load. The family house was typical Filipino provincial two-story concrete with bars on the windows, painted yellow but fading, a small yard with a mango tree and some potted plants. Not poor, but working class. Lived in. Real. Inside was cooler than outside, but still warm. No air conditioning, just electric fans circulating the humid air. The living room had a sofa covered in plastic, like my grandmother used to do. Religious stuff everywhere. A crucifix above the doorway, a picture of the Last Supper, a small altar with candles, and a statue of the Virgin Mary. The smell of cooking came from the kitchen. Garlic and vinegar. Something frying. Crystal's mother came out first. Ailing Precy, short, maybe early 60s, wearing a simple house dress and an apron. She had Crystal's smile, warm and genuine. "Welcome, welcome," she said, taking both my hands. "Crystal told us about you, the American baker. You eat already? You hungry?" "I could eat," I said, which was apparently the right answer because she beamed and immediately started pulling me toward the kitchen. Crystal's father appeared from a back room, Mang Rogelio. He was thin, maybe late 50s, with the weathered skin and calloused hands of someone who worked with his hands his whole life. He wore jeans and a faded polo shirt. Crystal had mentioned he drove a taxi, and he had that driver energy, observant, friendly, used to making small talk with strangers all day. "Roy," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "Crystal says you know about bakeries. 30 years, she said." "That's right. Portland, Oregon. Just sold it last year." 30 years, he repeated, impressed. "That's a long time. You must have started young." We sat down at the dining table, a big wooden thing that looked like it had hosted 1,000 family meals. Ailing Precy kept bringing out food. Kinilaw, which Crystal had promised raw fish cured in vinegar and calamansi, mixed with onions and ginger. Grilled bangus. Lumpia, bangus, rice, of course. Way too much food for the people present. Other family members drifted in. Crystal's younger brother, June, who worked construction. He was maybe 30, muscular, friendly, but quiet. A couple of nieces and nephews' kids running around, shy but curious about the American visitor. An aunt who lived down the street. What struck me was how Mang Rogelio talked to me. Not about money, not fishing for anything. He asked about the bakery, what it was like running your own business, dealing with difficult customers, the early mornings. He told me about driving a taxi, the characters he met, the tourists who didn't understand how to negotiate fares, the regular passengers he'd driven for years. We talked about work, about pride in what you do with your hands, about the satisfaction of providing for your family, even when it's hard. He had the hands of a man who'd worked every day of his life and didn't complain about it. "You know what I mean," he said. "When you wake up at 3 in the morning to make bread, you're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it for your family, for the people who depend on you." Something in my chest unclenched when he said that. He got it. He understood what I'd been trying to do all those years. Even if my ex-wife hadn't, even if my daughters didn't, Ailing Precy kept piling food on my plate. Every time I'd finish something, she'd add more. "Eat, eat. You're too thin. Crystal, get him more rice." She had the same fussing energy my grandmother used to have. Like feeding people was how she showed love. The kids warmed up to me after a while, started calling me Tito, Roy, Uncle Roy. They wanted to know about America. Did I have a big house? Did I have a car? What was snow like? They'd never seen snow. I showed them pictures on my phone from Portland in winter, and they couldn't believe it. Nobody asked me for money. Nobody mentioned how much things cost or how hard times were. They just treated me like a guest. Like family, almost. After lunch, Mang Rogelio and I sat outside in the yard, drinking San Miguel beer in the shade of the mango tree. The heat was oppressive, but the beer was ice cold. "Crystal hasn't brought a man home in years," he said casually. "She works too hard, always focused on helping the family. She's the eldest daughter, you know, carries a lot of responsibility." She mentioned she works as a bookkeeper for a shipping company downtown. Good job, good pay. But she's always helping us, her mother, her brother, the nieces and nephews. Never thinks about herself. Never married. I worry she'll end up alone. He said it like he was just making conversation, not like he was selling me on anything. Just a father worried about his daughter's future. I stayed for 5 hours that day, left when it started getting dark. Ailing Prissy packed food for me to take back to the Hotel Lupia, wrapped in foil, some leftover pancit, a couple of bananas from their tree. "You come back any time," she said, hugging me. "You're always welcome here." On the drive back to my hotel, Crystal was quiet at first. Then she said, "Thank you for coming. I know it's weird, meeting the whole family like that, but that's how we are here. Family is everything." "They're good people," I said, and I meant it. "They liked you. Papa doesn't open up like that with just anyone. He sees you're a good man, a hard worker, someone who understands what it means to provide for family." Something warm spread through my chest when she said that. For the first time in years, someone saw me the way I wanted to be seen. Not as the absent father, not as the workaholic who chose business over family, but as a man who worked hard and took care of people. I left Cebu 2 days later, flew back to Portland with Aling Pressy's lumpia in my carry-on and Crystal's number in my phone. We stayed in touch. Facebook Messenger mostly, sometimes WhatsApp. She'd send me pictures, her uncle's bakery operation, family gatherings, random stuff from her day. I'd send her pictures from Portland. The rain. Coffee shops. Nothing romantic. Just friendly. She never asked for money, never even hinted at need. When I mentioned maybe coming back to visit in a few months, she seemed happy but not desperate. "Only if you want to, Roy. I know you have your own life there, but if you do come back, you know you have family here now." Family. I hadn't felt like part of a family in 5 years. My daughters didn't call. My ex-wife had poisoned that well completely. But here was Crystal, offering something I thought I'd lost forever. This was what made it different in my mind. She wasn't some bar girl trolling for customers. She wasn't performing. She had a job, a life, a family who took care of each other without foreign help. I wasn't her meal ticket. I was just someone she enjoyed talking to. Someone her family welcomed. Someone who finally felt like he belonged somewhere. Looking back now, I should have questioned why that felt so perfect. Why it all lined up exactly with what I needed to believe. But when you're that lonely, that desperate to be needed by someone, you don't question gifts. You just accept them and feel grateful. I started planning my second trip before I even unpacked from the first one. I came back to Cebu 3 months later, booked 3 weeks this time instead of 10 days, rented a small Airbnb apartment in Cebu City so I wouldn't feel like I was imposing on anyone. Crystal picked me up from the airport, and the first thing she did was laugh at how much luggage I'd brought. "You moving here permanently?" she teased. "Just wanted to be prepared," I said. But honestly, part of me was already thinking about it. 3 months back in that Portland studio apartment had been brutal. The loneliness had gotten worse, not better. At least here I had someone to talk to, a family that seemed to want me around. We fell into an easy routine. Crystal worked Monday through Friday of the shipping company, so I'd explore Cebu during the day, visit historical sites, walk around the malls, try different restaurants. We'd meet up in the evenings and on weekends. She showed me the real Philippines, not the tourist version. We went to Magellan's Cross and the Basilica del Santo Niño. But she also took me to local places, a carinderia where she ate lunch sometimes, the carbon market where her mother sold vegetables, beaches in Molbawo where locals went instead of tourists. The Sunday lunches at the family house became a regular thing. I'd show up with pasalubong gifts, which Crystal explained was expected when you visited. Nothing expensive, just stuff from the bakery near my Airbnb, or fruit from the market, or toys for the kids. Ailing Pressy would fuss over me. Mang Rogelio and I would drink beer and talk. The kids would show me their schoolwork and ask for help with English homework. I met more of the extended family. Cousins, aunts, uncles, neighbors who were practically family. Everyone was friendly. Everyone wanted to know about America, about my bakery, about my life. Nobody asked for money. Mang Rogelio would sometimes pick me up in his taxi when Crystal was working. He'd refuse payment every time. "You're family now, Roy. Family doesn't pay family." He'd take me around, show me parts of Cebu I wouldn't have found on my own. We'd stop at his favorite spots. A karaoke bar, where he knew the owner. A street vendor who made the best balut. A basketball court where old guys played in the evenings. It was during the fourth week, right before I was supposed to fly home, that the money started. We were all having Sunday lunch as usual. The conversation was normal talk about the upcoming fiesta, complaints about traffic, June talking about a construction job he'd just finished. Then Aling Prisi mentioned, almost in passing, that they were a bit behind on the electric bill. Meralco had sent a warning. Business had been slow at the market because of the rain. I saw Crystal's face. The embarrassment, the shame. She shot her mother a look that said, "Why are you bringing this up in front of Roy?" But Ailing Prisi just shrugged like she was making conversation. "How much is the bill?" I asked. "Don't worry about it," Crystal said quickly. "We'll figure it out. We always do." "No, seriously. How much?" Aling Prisi said it was about 15,000. I did the quick math in my head, about 270. Less than I'd spend on groceries back home in a month. Less than nothing, really. "Let me help with that," I said. Crystal looked mortified. "Roy, no. You're our guest. You don't. I want to help. It's not a big deal." "I want to help. It's not a big deal." The reaction was overwhelming. Ailing Prisi actually cried. She hugged me and kept saying, "Salamat, salamat. You are a blessing from God. You are an angel." Mang Rogelio shook my hand with both of his eyes wet. The kids all said, "Thank you, Tito Roy," in unison like they'd rehearsed it. Crystal pulled me aside later while her mother was cleaning up. "You didn't have to do that." I'm so embarrassed that she even mentioned it. "We manage. We always manage." "I know you manage," I said, "but I want to help. That's what family does, right?" She looked at me for a long moment. Then she hugged me, and I could feel her shaking a little. "You're a good man, Roy, a really good man." I flew back to Portland feeling 10 feet tall. I'd helped. I'd been useful. I'd been needed. The pattern established itself naturally after that. I started sending 15,000 every month through Remitly. Just regular help for the family. Less than 300 a month, barely noticeable from my pension. Crystal would message me updates. The money paid for new stock for Aling Prisi's vegetable stand, kept the electric on, bought rice and groceries for the month. She'd send pictures of the family eating dinner, of the kids in their school uniforms, of Mang Rogelio's taxi running smoothly. It felt good. My daughters didn't need me. They had their own lives, their own careers, their own money. But this family needed me. This family appreciated what I could provide. 3 months after I got back to Portland, Crystal called me crying. It was 2 a.m. Portland time, afternoon in Cebu. Something was wrong with her father's taxi. The transmission had blown. Mang Rogelio couldn't work without it, and June was trying to help fix it, but they needed parts. The repair was going to cost 45,000, about 800. "I'm so sorry to even tell you this," she said through tears. "I know you already do so much for us. Please don't think we're asking. I needed to talk to someone, and you're the only person outside the family who would understand how scared I am. Papa can't work if the taxi's broken. That's his only income." "How soon do you need it?" I asked. "Roy, no, I wasn't. I'm not asking you for Crystal. How soon?" "The mechanic needs payment up front for the parts. But please, you don't have to. I sent the money within an hour. Wired it through Western Union, so she'd have it that same day. Mang Rogelio called me personally that night." His voice was shaking. "Roy, I don't know what to say. You saved us. Without the taxi, I can't provide for my family. You saved us. Salamat, salamat." I felt like a superhero. That's the thing about helping people when you've been useless for so long. It's addictive. Every time I sent money, I got that hit of being essential, of mattering, of being the kind of man I'd always wanted to be, the provider, the helper, the one people could count on. 3 months later, it was Crystal's niece, the girl who wanted to be a nurse. She needed 2,000 for tuition, about 400. If she couldn't pay by Friday, she'd lose her slot in the nursing program. She had good grades. She was smart. She deserved a chance. I sent it. A month after that, the roof started leaking during typhoon season. Water was getting into the house, damaging things. They needed 35,000 for repairs, about $620. I sent it before Crystal even finished explaining the problem. Each time, the apologies got more elaborate, the gratitude more overwhelming, the assurances that they'd pay me back someday, when things got better. Each time I'd tell them not to worry about it. That's what family does. Family helps each other. I was keeping a mental tally, of course. By month 7, I'd sent about 4,500 total. The monthly 115,000 plus the taxi repair, the tuition, the roof. It was adding up. But my savings could handle it. My pension covered my basic expenses in Portland. The 95,000 from selling the bakery was just sitting in the bank anyway. What was I saving it for? I didn't have kids to leave it to. Emma and Sophie had made it clear they wanted nothing from me. At least this money was going to people who appreciated it, who needed it, who saw me as a blessing instead of a disappointment. Looking back now, I can see the progression. How each request was just a little bigger than the last. How the time between requests got shorter. How the emergencies always seemed to come right when I'd gotten comfortable again. But at the time, each request made perfect sense. These things happen. Taxis break down. Kids need tuition. Roofs leak. This was just normal life for a working-class family in the Philippines, and I had the means to help. What kind of person would I be if I didn't? The kind of person my ex-wife said I was, probably. The kind who could help but chose not to. The absent provider. The man who put money ahead of people. Here was my chance to be different. To be better. To be the man a family actually wanted around. I told myself I was building something. Investing in relationships that mattered. Creating a future where I wouldn't be alone anymore. I told myself a lot of things. My third visit to Cebu came 8 months into whatever Crystal and I were building. We still hadn't put a label on it, weren't officially dating. But we talked every day. I was sending money monthly, and I'd started thinking of myself as part of the family. The visit before had been just 2 weeks. This time I booked 3. Crystal picked me up from Mactan Airport with her uncle in tow, Tito Bernardo. I'd met him briefly before at family gatherings, but this time he had something specific he wanted to discuss. We drove to his bakery operation first, before even going to the house. It was in a commercial area of Talisay, a small storefront with a production space in back. The smell hit me before we even got out of the car, yeast and sugar and that particular scent of dough in various stages of rising. made me homesick for something I'd sold off and couldn't get back. The operation was modest, but legitimate. 2 deck ovens, a commercial mixer, racks of cooling pandesal, a couple of workers kneading dough by hand. Tito Bernardo was maybe 60, thin, with flour permanently embedded under his fingernails. Crystal says, "You know artisan bread," he said in heavily accented English. "Sourdough. European style. I want to expand, not just pandesal, real bread. The expats and rich Filipinos, they want this. They pay good money for it." We talked shop for an hour. He showed me his current setup, his profit margins, his regular customers. He sold to a few local sari-sari stores, had some wholesale contracts with hotels. The numbers were real. This was an actual business, not some scam. "I need better equipment," he said. "A stone deck oven for sourdough. Better flour. I can get it from Manila, but it's expensive. And I need someone who knows how to do it right. Someone to teach my workers the techniques." That's when he made the pitch. With 12,000, they could upgrade equipment, source higher quality ingredients, start producing artisan loaves. I'd be a partner, not majority owner, since foreigners couldn't legally own most businesses in the Philippines, but a genuine investor. I'd get a percentage of profits, and when I eventually moved to Cebu permanently, I could work there. Use my expertise. Build something again. My heart jumped at that. The idea of having work again, of being useful, of standing in a bakery at 4 a.m. and smelling sourdough instead of sitting alone in my Portland studio scrolling through my daughter's social media. Crystal was hesitant when Tito Bernardo left us alone for a minute. "It's a lot of money, Roy. Are you sure?" "I don't want you to feel pressured. He's been wanting to expand for years, but if you're not comfortable, I want to do it," I said. And I did. This was perfect. My knowledge, their local connections, a real partnership. I could finally work again. I toured the operation more thoroughly over the next few days. Watched the workers, calculated costs, projected potential revenue. The numbers made sense. With good sourdough and ciabatta, charging premium prices to expats and wealthy locals, they could double their current income. Maybe triple it. I wired 12,000 from my savings account 2 days before I flew home. Tito Bernardo gave me an official-looking receipt and a partnership agreement that his lawyer had drawn up. Everything seemed legitimate. Everything felt right. Back in Portland, the updates started coming. Photos of new equipment being delivered, construction on an expanded production space, bags of imported flour from a supplier in Manila. Tito Bernardo sent videos of his workers practicing sourdough techniques based on instructions I'd sent. Crystal forwarded pictures of the renovation's new shelving, a second oven being installed, fresh paint on the walls. I started planning my 4th visit, when I'd finally get to train the staff hands-on. Teach them proper sourdough starter maintenance, scoring technique, baking times, and temperatures. I was excited in a way I hadn't been since I sold Roy's bread. Then came the escalation. 2 months after the bakery investment, Crystal called crying. June had been in a motorcycle accident. He was okay, bruised ribs, road rash, nothing life-threatening, but PhilHealth didn't cover everything. The hospital wanted $110,000 up front for treatment and medication. About $2,000. She sent me photos of the hospital paperwork, X-rays of June's ribs, medical bills with the hospital's letterhead. It all looked real. "I know you just invested so much in the bakery," she said through tears. "I hate asking for anything else. But June doesn't have insurance, and we don't have that kind of money. Please, you don't have to. I just don't know what else to do." I sent it within the hour. What else was I going to do? Let June suffer because of medical bills. The kid had always been friendly to me, quiet but respectful. This was family. Mang Rogelio called me afterward, voice breaking. You saved my son, Roy. God sent you to us. I don't know how we'll ever repay this kindness. 2 months later, Aling Preshi needed surgery. Gallstones. She'd been in pain for weeks, putting it off because of the cost. Phil Health would cover some of it, but they needed $65,000 out of pocket, about $1150. I sent it. Of course I sent it. What kind of person lets their girlfriend's mother suffer because of money? Then came the big one. The request that should have made me pause, but instead made me feel more essential than ever. Crystal video called me one evening, speaking carefully like she'd rehearsed this. Roy, I need to talk to you about something, and please say no if you're not comfortable. Please, I mean it. They wanted to build an extension on the family house. Nothing fancy, just a proper room instead of me sleeping on the couch when I visited. A private space with a real bed, maybe a small bathroom. Eventually, when I moved to the Philippines permanently, it could be our space. Mine and Crystal's. The cost, $480,000. About $8,500. I hesitated for the first time since this whole thing started. I'd already sent over $25,000 total by this point. The monthly $5,000 support for almost 8 months, plus the bakery investment, June's hospital bills, Ailing Precy's surgery, and all the smaller things in between. My savings account, which had been $95,000 after selling the bakery, was down to about $67,000. That's a lot of money, I said carefully. I know, Crystal said quickly. That's why I'm telling you to say no if it's too much. We'll figure something else out. You've already done so much for us. Too much. I feel terrible even bringing this up. But then she explained the reasoning. The house was small. I deserved my own space when I visited, and she'd been really thinking about us, about a future together. She wasn't getting any younger. Neither was I. Maybe it was time to stop pretending this was casual. Maybe it was time to actually build something together. If we're serious about you moving here eventually, she said, then having a proper space for you makes sense. But only if you want this. Only if you see a future here. That's what got me. Not the room, not the privacy, but the implication that we were building towards something permanent, that she was thinking about us the way I was thinking about us. That I wasn't just some lonely American throwing money at a family for companionship, but someone they genuinely wanted around long term. I sent the money in 2 installments, $240,000 in March, another $240,000 in April. Crystal sent progress photos every few days. Foundation being poured, walls going up, roof installation, windows, painting. It looked real. It looked legitimate. By June, there were photos of the finished room, simple but nice. A queen bed, a small desk, a bathroom with a real shower instead of the tableau and bucket setup the rest of the house used. An air conditioning unit in the window. For when you come home, Crystal messaged with the final photo. Home. She'd called it home, but the warning signs were piling up, even if I couldn't let myself see them clearly. Crystal rarely wanted to video call when she was at the house. Always had excuses, internet was bad, family was too noisy in the background. She was embarrassed about how modest everything looked. We'd video chat when she was at work or at a coffee shop, but never at home. Mang Rogelio was never there during my visits, even though he supposedly lived in that house. Crystal explained he often stayed at a cousin's place closer to his taxi stand to save on gas and time. Made sense in theory, but it was odd that I'd never spent meaningful time with him there. The bakery expansion was taking forever. Always more delays, permit problems, supply chain issues. Philippines bureaucracy, Crystal would say with a shrug. Everything takes longer than it should here. You'll get used to it. I told myself these were just cultural differences, just the reality of doing business in a developing country, just normal stuff that seemed suspicious because I was an outsider who didn't understand how things worked here. The truth? I couldn't afford to see the warning signs. I'd invested too much by this point financially and emotionally. I'd sent over 26,000. I'd told myself a story about building a new life. I'd imagined myself as Tito Roy, the American baker who joined a Filipino family and finally belonged somewhere. If I questioned any of it now, the whole structure would collapse. And then what? Go back to Portland and admit I'd blown half my life savings on people who'd been playing me? Go back to that studio apartment and wait for my daughters to never call? When you're that deep in, you can't see a way out. You can only go deeper and hope you're wrong about your doubts. I booked my 4th trip to Cebu for September. 3 weeks, finally long enough to really settle in, work at the bakery, sleep in the new room that had been built for me. Finally long enough to start my new life. I had no idea I'd be spending most of that trip sleeping in a room built with my money, in a house where the man I'd been calling Papa for over a year was actually sleeping somewhere else because he was my girlfriend's husband. But I'd find that out soon enough. I landed in Cebu in early September with 3 checked bags and a carry-on full of baking equipment. A Danish dough whisk I'd had custom made, a lame for scoring bread with replacement blades, and my pride and joy, a sourdough starter I'd been maintaining for 2 weeks, kept alive in a special insulated container with ice packs I'd refreshed during my layover in Taipei. This was it. The beginning of my new life. Crystal picked me up at the airport alone this time. She seemed happy to see me but distracted. Kept checking her phone in the car. "Everything okay?" I asked. Fine, just work stuff. They're short-staffed this week and keep messaging me even though I took the day off." We drove straight to the house in Talisay. I wanted to see the bakery, but Crystal said it still wasn't ready. More permit delays. The equipment was installed, but they couldn't operate until inspections cleared, maybe another month. She seemed genuinely frustrated about it, so I didn't push. The new room was exactly as it had looked in the photos. Simple, but comfortable. The air conditioning worked. The shower had actual hot water. I unpacked my bags and distributed the pasalubong I'd brought: coffee from Portland for Ailing Prissy, a blazer's cap for Jun, toys and candy for the kids, a nice flashlight for Mang Rogelio's taxi. The family was warm, as always. Ailing Prissy cried when she saw me and insisted I was too thin, needed to eat more. The kids showed me their latest school projects and asked if I'd brought pictures of snow. John shook my hand and thanked me again for helping with his hospital bills after the accident. But something felt off. I couldn't articulate what it was exactly. Just a strange energy in the house, like everyone was performing a little too hard. Smiles that didn't quite reach eyes. Conversations that felt rehearsed. And Crystal seemed different, more distant. She'd disappear to take phone calls, always saying it was work. She'd check her messages constantly. A couple of times I saw her texting in Tagalog, and she'd quickly put her phone away when she noticed me looking. "You sure everything's okay?" I asked one night when we were alone in my new room. "I'm sorry," she said. "I've just been so stressed with work. And I feel bad that the bakery isn't ready yet. I know you were excited to start working there." "It's fine," I said. "These things take time. I get it." But I didn't really get it. The expansion had been going on for 6 months now. How long did permits take? Mang Rogelio was never there. Not once during my 2-week stay did I see him at the house. When I asked about it, Crystal had the same explanation: he was staying with his cousin near the taxi stand to save time and gas money. It was cheaper than driving back and forth every day. Made sense. But it was weird. I built a whole room addition to this house, sent nearly $50,000 to this family over 18 months, and I barely saw the patriarch anymore. The Sunday lunches continued. Extended family would come over. We'd eat, drink San Miguel, talk about nothing important. But now I was starting to notice things. The way people would glance at each other when they thought I wasn't looking. The way conversations would stop when I entered a room. The way Crystal's phone would buzz constantly and she'd ignore it during meals. But I could see the stress on her face. I started taking Tagalog lessons on Duolingo 4 months before this trip. It was supposed to be a surprise for Crystal, a way to better integrate into the family, to show I was serious about building a life here. I'd kept it secret, wanting to reveal my progress when I was more fluent. I wasn't fluent, not even close, but I could understand basic conversations now, enough to catch key words and phrases, enough to know when people were talking about money, about time, about leaving. One afternoon, I heard Ailing Prissy and Crystal talking in the kitchen. They didn't know I was in the living room behind the wall. Ailing Prissy said something about Hanggang kailan, how long? Crystal responded with Kanti na lang, just a little longer. Then something about Malachi, big or large. I told myself they were talking about the bakery renovations, about how long until it was done, about the large investment we'd made. But my stomach twisted anyway. On my final day, I packed my bag slowly. Part of me didn't want to leave. Part of me wanted to stay and figure out what was wrong, to confront the feeling that something wasn't right. But I'd already bought my ticket, had to get back to Portland, would return in a few months, maybe for good this time. Crystal was at work. She'd taken the morning off to say goodbye but had to go in for the afternoon. Mang Rogelio offered to drive me to the airport in his taxi. No charge, of course, he said with that familiar warm smile. Your family, Roy. Family doesn't pay family. I climbed into the back seat of his taxi around 1 p.m. The drive from Talisay to Mactan Airport would take about 40 minutes depending on traffic. We loaded my bags, including the now empty container that had held my sourdough starter, which I'd left with Tito Bernardo's bakery as planned. Mang Rogelio chatted as he drove, asking about my flight, hoping I had a good visit, saying how much the family appreciated everything I did for them. I responded automatically, my mind elsewhere, still trying to shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. We were about 20 minutes into the drive when his phone rang. It was connected to the car's speaker system. He answered in Tagalog without thinking. "Who?" he said. "Yes?" Crystal's voice came through the speakers, tinny and clear. Speaking in rapid Tagalog. My Tagalog wasn't good enough to catch everything, but I caught enough. Nanyan na ba siya? Is he there already? Or maybe, is he almost gone? Who? Nandito siya sa taxi ko niyan. Yes, he's here in my taxi now. Nakuha mo na ba? Did you get it already? Nagpadala siya kahapon. Tama ang amount. Yes, he sent it yesterday. The amount was right. Then Crystal laughed. Actually laughed. Said something I only partly understood, but I caught the key words kano, madali, asawa ko, kano, the term for Western men, Americans. Madali easy. Asawa ko, my husband. My chest felt like it was caving in. She kept talking. Mang Rogelio responded. I caught fragments, kailan, when, tapos na, finished or done. Hospital, said in English. Puso, heart. Then Crystal said clearly, dalawang buwan. Tapos sasabihin ko kailangan ing surgery si papa, sa puso. Last one na yun. Tapos na tayo. My Tagalog was rough, but I understood enough. 2 months. Then I'll say Papa needs surgery. For his heart. That'll be the last one. Then we're done. Mang Rogelio laughed. Sige, mabuti, ang daling tao nito. I didn't need perfect translation for that. Something like, okay, good, this person is so easy. They kept talking, making plans, discussing when to hit me up for one final big emergency. Crystal's voice was light, happy, nothing like the stressed woman who'd been checking her phone all week. I sat frozen in the back seat, understanding every word that mattered. The man driving me wasn't Crystal's father. He was her husband, Mang Rogelio, the taxi driver I'd been helping for 18 months. The man whose taxi I'd paid to repair. The man whose house I'd built an extension onto. The man whose family I'd supported with nearly $50,000. Crystal had never lived alone. She lived with her husband. They'd been running this whole thing together from the beginning. The bakery expansion probably didn't exist. Jun's motorcycle accident might have been fabricated. Ailing Prissy surgery, who knows if that was even real. Every Sunday lunch, every warm smile, every salamat, every time the kids called me Tito Roy, it had all been theater. I was the mark, the easy Cano with money and loneliness to spare. And they'd played me perfectly. Mang Rogelio finished his call with Crystal and hung up, humming along to the radio. He had no idea I'd understood any of it. Why would he? I was just the dumb American who'd never mentioned studying Tagalog, who'd swallowed every story they'd fed me, who'd been so desperate for family that he'd ignored every single warning sign. "Traffic's not too bad today," he said to me in English, glancing in the rearview mirror. "You should make your flight with plenty of time." I managed to nod. My phone was in my pocket. I could have recorded that conversation. Could have confronted him right there. Could have demanded answers. But what was the point? I'd given them the money willingly. Met them in person, built relationships, believed their stories. There was no scam in the legal sense, just me being stupid enough to send money to people who'd figured out exactly what I needed to believe. We pulled up to the airport. Mang Rogelio helped me with my bags, pulling them from the trunk with practiced efficiency. "Safe travels, Roy," he said, extending his hand for a shake. "Come back soon. Your family." Family. I shook his hand, tipped him $20 out of pure muscle memory, watched him count the bills and smile. "Salamat, Roy. God bless you." I walked into the terminal, my chest hollow, my legs moving on autopilot. Before I even got to the check-in counter, I pulled out my phone and blocked Crystal's number. Blocked Ailing Prissy. Blocked Jun. Blocked everyone. There was already a message from Crystal. "Miss, you already baby. Safe flight. I'll call you when you land." I deleted it. Sat in the airport for 3 hours before my flight, staring at nothing, replaying every moment of the last 18 months, every request, every apology, every tearful thank you, every tearful thank you, every warm embrace. Every time I'd felt like I finally mattered to someone, it had all been a performance, and I'd paid for front row seats. The flight home was 13 hours of sitting with the knowledge, unable to escape it, unable to sleep, unable to do anything but calculate exactly how much I'd lost. 18 months of monthly support at $15,000. The taxi repair, the tuition, the roof. Jun's hospital bills, Ailing Pressy's surgery, the bakery investment that would never happen. The room addition I'd never sleep in again. $47,800. Half of everything I'd saved from 30 years of waking up at 3 a.m. to make bread. Gone. I got back to Portland on a Tuesday afternoon, took a lift from the airport to my studio apartment in Southeast. The driver tried to make small talk about where I'd been, and I gave one-word answers until he got the hint and turned up the radio. The apartment looked exactly like I'd left it. Small. Empty. The same stack of mail on the counter that had been there when I left. The same view of the parking lot. The same silence. I didn't unpack. Just sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall. The first week back I moved through my days like a ghost. Grocery shopping, laundry, walks around the neighborhood. All the things I'd been doing before the Philippines, except now I couldn't even pretend there was something better waiting for me somewhere else. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Who would I tell? My daughters, who hadn't spoken to me in 3 years. Dennis, who'd recommended the Philippines in the first place and would probably feel terrible. My old employees from the bakery who'd moved on with their lives. The humiliation was too thick, too heavy. I was a 54-year-old man who should have known better, who'd heard all the warnings, who'd watched documentaries and read articles about scams in Southeast Asia, who'd convinced himself he was different, she was different, this situation was different. I'd sent 47,800 over 18 months, nearly half of everything I'd saved from 30 years of 3 a.m. mornings. The monthly 15,000 allowance times 18 months, that alone was almost 5,000. The taxi repairs, the medical bills, the tuition, the roof, the bakery investment that never existed, the room addition I'd never sleep in again. Gone. My savings account that had been $95,000 after selling the bakery was now sitting at $47,200. Still more than a lot of people have. Still enough to survive on with my pension. But half of my life's work evaporated because I'd been too lonely and too desperate to see what was right in front of me. The worst part wasn't the money, though. Not really. The worst part was the hope. For 18 months, I'd believed I'd found a family who actually wanted me around. Not for what I could do for them or what I could provide, but for who I was. I'd believed I was essential to people, that my presence mattered, that I'd finally found a place where I belonged. I'd been ready to move to the Philippines permanently, sell everything, get a retirement visa, spend my remaining years as Tito Roy, the American baker who taught sourdough techniques to a Filipino family and showed up for Sunday lunches. I'd imagined growing old there, being part of something, mattering to someone. Every warm smile had been calculated. Every salamat had been a performance. Every moment of connection I'd treasured Mang Rogelio asking about my bakery techniques. Aling Preshi piling food on my plate, the kids calling me Tito Roy, Crystal talking about our future together. All of it was a transaction I hadn't realized I was paying for. I think about my actual daughters now, Emma and Sophie. Maybe my ex-wife was right about me. Maybe I did choose work over family. Maybe I did miss too many important moments. Maybe I was absent when it mattered. But at least that love had been real, even if I'd failed at it. Even if I'd screwed it up beyond repair. Emma and Sophie's distance hurt, but it was honest hurt, real hurt. The kind that comes from actual relationships between actual people who once loved each other. Crystal's warmth had been profitable theater. Mang Rogelio's fatherly conversations about the dignity of hard work had been an act. Ailing Presi's tears when I helped with the electric bill had been rehearsed. The whole thing was a business, and I was the product they'd been harvesting for a year and a half. I wonder sometimes if Crystal ever felt even a flicker of genuine affection for me. If there was any moment, any single moment, when she saw me as a person instead of a revenue stream. When that conversation in the supply shop about sourdough hydration ratios was actually interesting to her instead of the opening move in a long con, I'll never know. And it doesn't matter anyway. She was good at her job. I'll give her that. 3 months after I got back, I'm still in the same studio apartment. The daughters still don't call. I picked up some part-time work at a friend's coffee shop not because I need the money, but because the alternative is sitting alone thinking about how thoroughly I'd been played. I haven't tried to get the money back. What's the point? There's no legal recourse across international borders for a man who willingly sent money to people he'd met in person multiple times and chose to trust. I wasn't hacked, wasn't threatened. I just made a series of decisions that seemed reasonable at the time and turned out to be incredibly stupid in retrospect. Sometimes at night I'll open my phone and look at the blocked contacts. Crystal, Ailing Presi Jun, Mang Rogelio, all the people I thought were family. I could unblock them, could send a message calling them out, could tell them I know exactly what they did. But what would be the point? They already know I know. The money stopped the day I blocked them. They got their answer. I learned something that bakers should already know. You can't transform shit ingredients into something beautiful just by wanting it badly enough. You can't proof dough that has no yeast. You can't make bread rise when the recipe is fundamentally broken from the start. Sometimes the ingredients are rotten, and no amount of hope, no amount of skill, no amount of needing and waiting and believing will fix it. You just waste time and resources on something that was never going to become what you needed it to be. The lesson isn't never trust Filipinos or all foreign women are scammers. I know that's not true. I know there are genuine relationships, genuine families, genuine connections happening between Western men and Filipino women every day. The lesson is simpler and harder than that. When you're lonely enough, desperate enough to be needed, you'll ignore every red flag, because the alternative is going back to being alone. And there are people in every single country, who can smell that desperation and know exactly how to monetize it. Crystal never wanted to video call when she was home. Mang Rogelio was never there during my visits, even though he supposedly lived in that house. The bakery expansion dragged on for months with no real progress. Every request came right when I'd gotten comfortable again, each one a little bigger than the last. I saw all of it, and I told myself stories to explain it away. Cultural differences, Philippines bureaucracy, bad internet, saving on gas money. All of it made sense if I wanted it to make sense, and I wanted it to make sense more than I wanted to see the truth. Because the truth meant going back to that studio apartment alone, going back to scrolling past my daughter's Instagram posts, going back to being nobody's Tito, nobody's partner, nobody's blessing from God. The truth meant admitting that I was still the same absent workaholic failure my ex-wife said I was, just older and more pathetic, throwing money at strangers halfway around the world because my own family didn't want me. The Philippines didn't break me. My loneliness did. Crystal and her family just took advantage of damage that was already there. That's what I've learned sitting here in Portland for the past 3 months. That's the wisdom I've earned for 47,800. I'm still here, still alone. Still waking up at 4 a.m. out of habit with nothing to do. But at least now I know what I'm worth to strangers who need money. At least now I know the exact price of feeling needed for 18 months. At least now I know. Roy's story isn't unique to the Philippines, but the family obligation culture there makes this particular scam devastatingly effective. In Filipino culture, supporting family really is genuinely expected. The eldest daughter often does carry the entire family financially. Millions of Filipinos work overseas as OFWs to send money home. The cultural framework is real. That's what makes it so insidious. Roy couldn't distinguish between authentic cultural obligation and calculated exploitation because both look identical from the outside. The monthly support, the emergency requests, the family gatherings, all of it exists in legitimate relationships too. The truth, Roy discovered that day in the taxi, that Crystal was married to the man he'd been calling Papa, crosses a line from aggressive opportunism into outright fraud. But Roy will never file a police report. The shame stops most victims from seeking justice, which is exactly what scammers count on. If you're watching this and seeing yourself in Roy's story, if you're sending monthly support to someone you met online or recently in person, if you're building houses or investing in businesses for a family that welcomed you fast, if you're funding education or medical emergencies for people you ask yourself one question. Would they welcome you the same way if the money stopped tomorrow? If that question makes you uncomfortable, you probably already know the truth. You're just not ready to face it yet. And I get it, Roy wasn't ready either. But the truth doesn't care about your readiness. It's still there, waiting. This is Inside the Philippines, where we tell the stories that the retirement vlogs won't. If Roy's story helped you avoid a similar fate, hit that subscribe button. And if you're currently living a version of this story, the comments section is full of people who understand. You're not alone, and you're not the first. Until next time, be careful out there. And remember, if it feels too good to be true, it probably is.